They called it the impossible mission. No species had ever survived the attempt. The best pilots, the most advanced AI, the strongest warriors, every single one had perished. The Galactic Union had stopped trying. They had declared a lost cause. Then a human volunteered. At first, there was laughter, then disbelief, then something closer to horror. "You don't understand," an Iltari scientist stammered, his bioluminescent tendrils flickering with distress. "We have sent species who are faster than you, stronger than you, infinitely more advanced in technology. They all died within minutes." The humans shrugged. Maybe they did it wrong. A silence fell over the council chamber. The mission was simple in theory, lethal in execution. A collapsing neutron star had destabilized a crucial warp corridor, a gateway linking the Union's most vital trade routes. The radiation storms alone would strip flesh from bone. The gravitational flux was beyond any ship's ability to counter. The last crew that attempted it had sent a single fragmented message before vanishing into oblivion. "Do not come here." The Union had listened. "Until now, I volunteer," the human repeated, arms crossed as if discussing a weekend assignment. The High Chancellor, a reptilian Erdani, narrowed his golden eyes. "Are you suicidal or simply ignorant?" "Neither." "Then explain why we should waste a ship on a doomed effort." "Because I'm not them," the human said simply. "And I don't lose." The murmurs returned. A mammalian strategist, her fur bristling with unease, tapped a claw against the table. "Human, we have documented your species. You are fragile. Your lifespan is short. You lack natural armor, redundant organs, or regenerative abilities." She paused. "And yet, you believe you can do what no one else has?" The human grinned. "Exactly." The debate lasted hours. The Union was out of options. Letting the corridor collapse would cripple their economy, their military, and their expansion efforts for centuries. No one else dared to try. So, against all reason, they let the human go. On the day of departure, an audience gathered, diplomats, generals, scientists. They watched the human climb into a ship that looked painfully outdated compared to the sleek vessels of the Union's elite forces. The Iltari scientist who had first protested stood near the launch bay, his tendrils dim with something like sorrow. "I do not wish to see another die needlessly," he said quietly. The human patted the hull of the ship. "Then watch me live." With a roar of thrusters, the craft lifted, accelerating towards certain death. In the control room, dozens of alien eyes tracked the tiny vessel as it approached the anomaly. Radiation spikes were already off the charts. The gravitational pull of the neutron star shifted erratically, turning space into a chaotic, shifting trap. An Erdani admiral leaned forward. Their ship should be tearing apart already. But it wasn't. Against all calculations, the human's vessel twisted to the maelstrom like a creature dancing on the edge of extinction. No pre-programmed trajectory. No AI assistance. Just a single pilot making split-second decisions that should have been impossible. "How are they still alive?" someone whispered. A scientist checked the readings in disbelief. "They are adapting." And the human? The human was grinning. The ship bucked and groaned under the strain, but the human's hands stayed steady. Every alarm blared, warning of impending failure. Hull stress, radiation exposure, gravitational shear. Any other pilot would have panicked. The human leaned forward, eyes sharp, mind clear. They weren't flying through the chaos. They were riding it. The neutron star pulsed, spitting arcs of unstable energy into the void. A gravitational wave surged through space, enough to crush anything caught in its wake. The human didn't try to fight it. They let the wave pull them, adjusting course microseconds before it slammed shut like a cosmic jaw. In the Galactic Union's control room, the assembled species watched in stunned silence. That maneuver, an Erdani tactician started, then cut himself off. "It shouldn't be possible," the Iltari scientist finished, tendrils flashing with disbelief. The human hadn't taken a mathematically optimal route. Every species before had relied on AI-assisted calculations, predetermined flight paths, redundant shielding. They had all failed. The human wasn't calculating. They were feeling their way through the storm. Inside the cockpit, sweat dripped down the pilot's face. Gravity fluctuated wildly, pressing them into their seat one moment, leaving them weightless the next. One miscalculation, 1 second too slow, and they would be vaporized. They grinned. A crackling voice came through the comms, some Union official frantically trying to talk them down. You need to turn back. The next energy surge will destabilize your trajectory. The human flicked off the channel. No distractions. They had come too far for second-guessing. Another gravitational spike loomed ahead, twisting space itself into a shimmering mirage. Any other species would see it as a death trap. The humans saw an opportunity. They adjusted course by a fraction, aligning their ship at just the right angle. The gravitational anomaly caught them, slingshotting them forward at speeds that should have torn the vessel apart. Union officials gasped as they watched the human ride an invisible tidal wave of cosmic forces, turning what should have been an unavoidable demise into a perfect acceleration boost. That wasn't luck, an Erdani admiral muttered, staring in awe. That was intentional. The Iltari scientist shook his head. But how? Inside the cockpit, the human exhaled slowly. This is fun, they murmured. Their ship rocketed forward, deeper into the anomaly, where no one had ever returned from. The ship's systems were failing. Radiation exposure had reached critical levels. The hull integrity warnings had long since gone ignored, and the gravitational distortions were pushing the limits of what any material could withstand. The human barely acknowledged any of it. Ahead, the core of the anomaly pulsed like a living thing, a swirling mass of light and shadow twisting reality itself. No ship had ever reached this deep. Every attempt had ended in destruction long before this point. The human's breath was steady. Back in the Union control room, panic had set in. They need to turn back now, an Erdani general barked. If they continue. They're not stopping, the Iltari scientist whispered. His bioluminescent tendrils were almost dim with shock. They're accelerating. Madness. That was the only explanation. Every species that had tried to map this region had done so with caution, careful calculations, and fail-safe protocols. And they had all failed. The human wasn't being cautious. They were committed. The gravitational waves ahead spiked unpredictably, shifting the entire structure of space-time in erratic bursts. Any pilot would be crushed under the stress of trying to track them. The human didn't bother tracking. They adapted. One wave surged toward them, a collapse of space that would crush the ship into nothingness. Any rational mind would attempt to evade it. The human? They dove into it. The control room erupted in horrified gasps. The ship vanished. Silence. The Iltari scientist closed his eyes. They're gone. But then, a shockwave rippled through the anomaly. A new trajectory appeared on the sensors, one that should have been impossible. The human ship had reappeared on the other side of collapse. The room fell deathly quiet. Someone started, but no one could find the words. Inside the cockpit, the human exhaled, muscles aching from the strain. They had done what no AI, no advanced species, no supercomputer had been able to do, because none of them had been human. The final barrier loomed ahead, the last unstable energy surge at the heart of the anomaly. No shield could withstand it. No ship could navigate through it. The human grinned. One more trick, they muttered, and they pushed forward. The final surge hit like a tidal wave of raw, unfiltered energy. Every warning system on the ship failed at once. Lights flickered, engines sputtered, and for a split second, everything was silent. Then the human forced the ship forward. No calculations, no hesitation, just instinct and sheer will. Back in the Union control room, chaos erupted. The ship's signal had vanished. The anomaly had reached its peak instability. Every species present braced for the inevitable failure. They're gone, a Zalari tactician whispered. The Iltari scientist turned away, bioluminescence flickering dim in mourning. Then, against every known law of physics, a single energy spike rippled outward. The gravitational distortions collapsed in on themselves, stabilizing. The radiation levels dropped. The anomaly, once an untamed, devouring storm, was gone, and so was the human. A long silence filled the room. The High Chancellor bowed his head. They'd succeeded. For the first time in Galactic Union history, an impossible mission had been completed, and a human had done it alone. Just as grief settled over the room, an incoming transmission blinked on the main screen. A garbled voice came through, scratchy but unmistakably amused. Mission complete. The room froze. The human ship, battered, barely holding together, emerged from the now stable corridor, drifting but very much intact. The pilot's voice crackled over comms. Told you it was possible. In that moment, the perception of humanity changed forever. Before, they had been seen as fragile, reckless, insignificant. Now, they were something else entirely. Scientists would spend centuries trying to understand what had happened. Military leaders would begin reevaluating strategies. Diplomats would rethink alliances, because they had just witnessed something no other species could explain. A human had done the impossible. And worse, they had enjoyed it. The Iltari scientist, still staring at the screen in shock, murmured to himself, "We don't understand them at all." The pilot, still grinning despite the near-death experience, leaned back in their chair, stretching tired muscles. The mission was over. The anomaly was gone. Another impossible feat. Checked off the list. They chuckled, flipping off the comms before the Union officials could bombard them with frantic questions. The last thing the Galactic Union heard before the transmission cut was a simple, amused statement. The impossible? That's just another Tuesday for us.